don't know that I've made the connection before that in these last weeks of our liturgical year, we hear the parable of the talents. And certainly one of the major implications there is that the best way, or a significant way that we can be alert, as we hear in the second reading, and awake in that, and not allowing that day to come upon us like a thief at night in darkness, but rather that we experience it in the light and not in fear, but in peace, is by making sure we maximize the gifts God has given us. That's certainly a huge part of our preparation and our readiness. Beyond the most essential element, which is that seeking of God's mercy, recognizing that Jesus is the source of our salvation, and repenting and constantly reconciling with our God through Jesus Christ. So hopefully that message is clear to us, and we are constantly challenged to be aware of our gifts and offering them back to God for His purpose, for His mission, for His glory. But another kind of focus, or maybe a more nuanced focus I'd like to present today, is the idea of not burying your funeral. Not burying your funeral. That might seem a little odd, and maximizing the moment of our funeral as a chance to evangelize. Kind of our last statement of faith to our family, to our church, to the world. And to be specific about planning it, allowing it to do just that, to be an expression of your faith, your hope in Jesus Christ, and also an inspiration to those who remain, who mourn your loss. And I specifically think of this, I mentioned at the All Souls service a couple weeks ago, that this is my first time going through All Souls and the month of November, which is a time we've talked about praying for our beloved dead in a special way, our book of remembrance, having lost a parent, having lost Mom back in January. And so it kind of brings it to another level for me, and in focus. And one of the things I mentioned back when the funeral happened back in January, but I want to kind of re-emphasize it today, but I mentioned it to some, was this idea of the impact of my mom's planning of her funeral had on all of us, and certainly the people that came. Really remarkable. And it kind of helped me appreciate on a whole nother level the opportunity that moment of the funeral is to, again, evangelize and invite people into a deeper appreciation of our faith in Jesus Christ. And it starts with the very fact, and I'd encourage you, read the bulletin letter that every November I put this in the bulletin on some level, about just some guidelines and reminders about the expectations of the church and our tradition when it comes to the rite of Christian burial. But first and foremost, the way to maximize and not bury our funeral is to make sure that we've arranged to have a funeral mass. It might seem kind of a no-brainer for us that gather here, but we're seeing more and more that even, Catholics that faithfully went to Mass, and maybe their families don't have that same instinct, or, that's not kind of a focused part of their life, that we see, funeral Mass is not happening. Obviously in COVID, it's a unique circumstance, and sometimes other things have to be done, but that's the way we maximize that moment. You've heard me say repeatedly, there's no greater Mass or prayer that we can offer for our beloved dead than the Mass. So for our deceased loved one who has passed, but no greater prayer we can offer for each other who have survived and are seeking strength and grace and consolation and hope. So to make sure we incorporate that. That's one way we don't bury the funeral, is by ensuring that a funeral Mass is part of our arrangements. And again, to go to the church. We have some resources for you to help you plan the funeral. Go to the funeral home to be specific about the things. One of the things that really struck me with my mom is the holy card that she chose. The image, that she chose of Our Lady Częstochowa in our Polish background and heritage. And then the quote she put on the other side. She used a quote from St. Augustine that had been up in our family room for our whole life, and I paid little attention to it, unfortunately. But it was the quote, to fall in love with God is the greatest romance, to seek him is the greatest adventure, to find him is the greatest human achievement. But what is a quote about our faith and about God that inspires you, that could be a source of inspiration for your loved ones during that time of loss? Planning the music and incorporating your favorite, the songs that have inspired you and given you strength over your life, to make sure those are incorporated in the funeral, certainly to the degree that they're appropriate, right? No Van Halen at your funeral, as much as I would like to try to make that happen. But the readings. What are the readings that are meaningful to you? And if you say, well, I don't have those, pray about it. Think about it. What are those key readings that give you strength and inspiration, that you want to be a statement? And that last time, as you're looking to take your step into that incredible eternal birth with our God forever in heaven. So all the elements of what we're putting together, making sure that they glorify God, that they're an expression of you, and not to underestimate the impact they can have on those who are gathering in your honor, but to pray for you. And remember, again, I always try to approach it this way. Weddings and funerals, they are great moments of evangelization, because we do tend to get people coming to those that aren't going to church regularly. So how are we maximizing that moment? We as a parish, but then the arrangements being made to really engage them. Maybe be a chance for them to be renewed in their relationship with God and their life in the church. Such opportunity there. So I hope we can all pray about it, think about it. If you haven't done that, can't encourage you enough to be intentional about making your funeral arrangements. I know a lot of us, and my parents, even when we started to kind of encourage it, it could feel awkward. It's that whole, our lack of really peace with this reality of our death. And we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to think about it. But yet again, as a church, every November we say, well, we have to talk about it. We have to think about it. It's a part of our reality. It's not something we should fear. It's not something that should be in darkness. It should be in the light, like St. Paul says. And if in planning it, it's another way of showing this doesn't own me. This doesn't scare me. This is something I'm at peace with because of my faith in Jesus Christ. And what a gift that is to be able to do that. So, yes, let's make sure we think about the ways that we don't bury all of our talents and all that God has given us to use them for God's glory, for his purpose, for his kingdom. But within that context, let's make sure that we don't bury our funeral, but we rather allow it to be our last statement, our last earthly expression of our faith, and to not minimize the impact that can have on the community that it has loved me and journeyed with me during my life. So let's make sure this year, and we think about that, we don't bury our funeral along with our talents.